Perfect. Just make sure you're adjusting to all panelists and attendees, please, if possible. All right, I see we're starting to add more people here as we're getting into the 7 o'clock time. So just a couple more minutes, everybody. Just hang tight. In the chat, is anybody here currently in high school? Is anybody here out of high school? Can you let us know what grade you're in right now, or if you're out of school? You're adjusting to all panelists and attendees, please, if possible. All right, I see we're starting to add more people here as we're getting into
got the
7 o'clock
YouTube
time.
looping
So just
right
a
now,
couple more
guys.
minutes, everybody. Just hang tight. In the chat, is anybody here currently in high school? Is anybody here out of high school? Can you let us know what grade you're in right now, or if you're out of school? You're adjusting to all panelists and attendees, please, if possible. All right, I see we're starting to add more people here as we're getting into
Someone's got the
7 o'clock
YouTube
time. So
looping
just
right
a
now,
couple more
guys.
minutes, everybody. Just hang tight. In the chat, is anybody here currently in high school? Is anybody here out of high school? Can you let us know what grade you're in right now, or if you're out of school? You're adjusting to all panelists and attendees, please, if possible. All right, I see.
Hey, anybody that's if anybody has the YouTube running, it's just continuing the loop.
Couple minutes, everybody. Just hang
Please
tight.
set it off.
In the chat, is anybody here currently in high school? Is anybody here out of high school?
if-
Can you let us know what grade you're in right now, or if you're out of school?
Can everyone mute their mic real
all
quick?
Panelists and attendees, please, if possible. All right, I see.
Hey, anybody that's if anybody has the YouTube running, it's just continuing the loop.
Couple more minutes, everybody. Just hang
Please
tight.
set it off.
In the chat, is anybody here currently in high school? Is anybody here
Yeah,
out of high school? Can you let us know what grade you're in right now, or if you're out of school?
Can everyone mute their mic real
all
quick?
Panelists and attendees, please, if possible. All right, I see.
Hey, anybody that's if anybody has the YouTube running, it's just continuing the loop.
Couple more minutes, everybody. Just hang
Please
tight.
set it off.
In the chat, is
Hey,
anybody here currently in high
guys,
school?
let's have everyone
Anybody here
mute
out of high school?
their
Can you let
mic.
us know what grade you're in right now, or if you're out of school?
Can everyone mute their mic real
all
quick?
Panelists and attendees, please, if possible. All right, I see.
Hey, anybody that's if anybody has the YouTube running, it's just continuing the loop.
Couple minutes, everybody. Well, I hope that woke everybody up. That was embarrassing, but thank you all for hanging in there with me. In the chat, if you want to go ahead and post a comment about how silly that looked, go for it. Hey guys, so it looks like we're going to be starting the workshop here, so let's just go ahead and get started. I know that woke me up. Sorry about that. That's just a broken loop problem. That was a first. So anyway, hi, welcome. My name is Hector Verdugo. I'm the Senior Vice President of Admissions here at Academy of Art University here in San Francisco, California, USA. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know there were people all over the globe here. I just stopped flat out talking because I never stopped talking in the loop, but I saw people from Turkey here. I saw people from India, China, people all over the United States. So thank you so much for being here tonight. We're super happy to have you. Tonight should be a wonderful event. We have a talented group here with us. This is awesome, the art and science of video game creation. Before we get started, I do want to drop a few things here in the chat just to make sure everybody's aware of what's going on here around the Academy. Next week is our animation and visual effects industry week. Every single day, Monday through Friday, there's going to be a plethora of different events. Just wanted to make sure we invite as many people as possible. Feel free to attend that. You can check out the link of the different events that are going on next week, and you can also register for the events there on the link that I just dropped. Should be a really cool week. We're going to have professional people from the industry talking in panelist forums, so you'll be able to actually ask questions, interact with some folks there, so it should be pretty cool. One of the other things I want to drop is that I tend to have a ton of students that want to talk after these events. They want to get to know more about the university. They want to learn more about scholarships. They want to talk about how to get into the school, whether they're grad, undergrad, international, or domestic student. Doesn't matter. Just send me a quick email. If you have the time now, even before the event, send me an email now. It's great. I'd love to just be able to connect with you and have a two-way with you. It really helps me to get started with figuring out how we can help you. So I just want to make sure open door, whether you end up going to a different school or you're just exploring, you just want to get information, don't worry about it. I'm more than happy to take the time to talk to anybody and try to help them figure out where they want to go. So Let's go ahead and just get started here with some rules of the house here. So in the chat, if you haven't already, make sure that you click on the chat button and adjust to all panelists and attendees. I'll be moderating the chat today, as well as our team here. We're going to be trying to take as many questions as we can and answer them and interact with you. Unfortunately, we cannot hear you, but we will be more than on top of the chat so that we can make sure that we're constantly communicating. We want it to be a great night. So the more questions that you ask, the better. We just want to make sure that it's lively and fun for you. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I do want to get started by introducing our executive director, David Goodwine. So a little bit about David. First of all, I know David personally. I've had the pleasure of traveling with him all over the United States doing workshops. He's an amazing guy. He's also an alumni from our animation and visual effects program here at the Academy. He's been in the entertainment industry for a little over 18 years, including 14 years in the video game industry. David has worked for companies such as Double Vision, Eidos, Crystal Dynamics, Electronic Arts, and PDI/DreamWorks. His game credits include projects such as 25 to Life, Legacy of Kain Defiance, Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, Project Snowblind, and Tomb Raider Legend. His films he's worked on include Evolution, The Mexican, The Deep End, The Legend of Bagger Vance, and Shrek 3D. So without further ado, everybody, I'm going to pass it over here to get us started with David Goodwine. My name's Hector Verdugo. I'll see you in the chat, and I'll see you at the end of the workshop. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Hector. As Hector said, I'm David Goodwine. I'm the executive director for the School of Game Development. I graduated from the Academy of Art University back in '98. When I got out of school, I started working for a small animation house called WildBrain. We were doing 2D animation at the time, and right when 3D animation started. So I worked there for a little while, and we did commercials and that kind of thing. Then I moved on to work at PDI DreamWorks. So if you don't know who PDI is, they did Shrek, Ants, they did a lot of animations, but DreamWorks had bought them out. So they were here in the Bay Area. They closed down a few years ago now. So then I moved from there. While I was at PDI, I had never thought I was going to go work in games. I was working in film. That's what I always wanted to do. And I was doing it, but I had the opportunity. Somebody from EA had contacted me and asked me if I wanted to work on Lord of the Rings. So I was like, yeah, that'd be great. So I left film and went to games, and I stayed in games. So I worked on 2 Lord of the Ring games while I was at EA. I left there to go to Crystal Dynamics to work on Legacy of Kain Defiance and Tomb Raider Legend and Tomb Raider Anniversary Edition and a few others. But, I went from there to, where else did I go? Oh, to Double Fusion, and was working there for a while. And then I was asked if I would be interested in help opening up the School of Game Development. So that was in 2009. The Academy of Art did not have a game development program at that time. So we started it. And now we're here. We're almost coming up on 12 years now that we've been running the program. So for us, for what we have students go through, we have them do concepts. So let's say you have a particular thing you want to do. We do concept art, we do 3D art, we do game design, we do technical art, and we do game programming. So, and the rest of the gentlemen that are here with us now, they're going to talk a little bit about each of those areas. Can we share my screen? Yeah, there we go. Can you see that or not? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
See it perfectly, David.
Great. Thank you. So if you, I'm going to just kind of scroll through these. I'm not going to take forever to do it because I want everybody else to talk. But when you're going through a pipeline of a game, there's different aspects that are kind of going on at the same time. There's the art side of things that are happening. There's the game design parts of things, and there's programming, and there's lots of other things that go on in between. But if we're starting in a pipeline and we have to come up with ideas of what that game's going to be and what it's going to look like, we have to start with the concept art of it, which like in this, now this work that I'm showing right now is all student work that we have had. And this actually is just from last year's spring show. I've got loads of work. We would be here all night if I was showing all of it. So I'm just going to show a few pieces. But if you look at this is sketchbook work from some of the students. So as you go down, this is, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do and what look do they want. And so they go through and figure that out. For some of these images, they're doing them in class, but then other ones they're doing outside of class on their own. So this is all, starting out. We're getting into like ideas. What are you going to do? We have classes where you're learning how to paint digitally. So this is all in Photoshop. This is a intro to digital painting class. So the students are learning how to just paint stuff. We paint everything in that class. So as you can see here, there's quite a different array of what you need to learn so you can paint. Now, the thing is, we have our concept artists take this class and we have our 3D artists take this class because they both need to know how to paint these particular things. For the 3D artists, they need to know how to paint their texture maps, and the concept artists need to learn how to manipulate it in Photoshop. Then we have classes where we're learning how to actually, these are all portraitures that the students have done. So, and all of this is digital. None of this is paint, actual paint. So we use Cintiqs in our classrooms to do this. And then from portraitures and that, we get into actually coming up with what, environments and characters. So they'll go through and do thumbnails. They're going to figure out their mood and figure out like how this thing's going to look. Then these are more finished pieces that the students have done. And, keep in mind that every year we have this spring show that we show off work from the students, and industry comes and interviews and looks at work. So last year was our first time that we actually did it digitally, totally digitally, where we did it all like we're kind of doing it right now, right? It's all through Zoom. And it actually worked out really well because we actually ended up getting studios that could not normally not come at that particular time. And we were able to get them to come interview because they didn't have to leave. They just had to go to at their desk, which turned out really well. So then we get into more character work. So in concept art, which this has been, this is where, some students really gravitate towards environment. Some really gravitate towards character. So, for a concept artist, it's your best bet is to know both. That will be a better choice for you. And we make you do it anyway. So that when you go to look for a job, you aren't just stuck in one spot. So Michael Buffington is our lead for concept art. And and he's the one that has set up these classes along with Brian Hess. So they, this, believe me, it's a lot of work, but if you do the work, it's well worth it. And then we can get down into props. And that's the thing, that's a thing in and of itself is prop art. As an environment artist, you're usually doing the props as well. At some companies, that's all people do is weapons, depending on where you're at. I mean, we have one of our alumni that was at Sledgehammer Games working on Call of Duty, and all he did was weapons for the game. And that's the other thing too, is we have so many of our students that have graduated and gone on, and they're working everywhere. They're working at Blizzard, they're working at Riot, they're at so many of the companies. And that's the other good thing about this area in the Bay Area in San Francisco, is there are so many game companies here locally that we have a lot of relationships with them. And we have a lot of relationships with a lot of the other studios too in the area. Now, this is, if you don't know what this is user interface and user experience. So this is UI UX. So if you look at a game, and any game that you ever play has to have buttons and menu systems, and how do you get around in the system of that game? Somebody's got to create that. And that's what the UI UX artists do. So we have those as well. So I know that's, people don't always think of that, but it is a thing. And then we get into 3D art, and these are done in the classes. Like I said, this is all student work. This particular piece here was runner up in the Blizzard Student Art Contest this year. Yeah, this past year. And then, and this is another 3D art piece. Same. And this one here won for the Blizzard Student Art Contest for character. Those were both for character. And this is some 3D environment. 3D prop. And more 3D prop. So that kind of just gives you an idea of what the students do on the art side. So I wanted to hand this over to Brian so he's our associate director. And he's also going to do a demo while he talks. So off to Brian. And you can probably take that off my.
Yeah. Hey guys, my name is Brian Hess. I'm the Associate Director of the department. Just to give a little background on my experience. So right out of high school, I started working at Noggin, working on a television show. I was doing storyboarding and character development for animation. And then I took a little detour and thought I was going to be a firefighter for a while. And then I came on back to art. Art was my calling. I thought that was the big kind of thing I wanted to get back into. So I went back to school for animation, and I ended up working mostly in mobile games when I graduated. I worked on some of the more recent games that I did was Family Guy Quest for Stuff. I worked on the beginning development of the Futurama mobile game. And before that, I did a lot of work at TinyCo, which is now Jam City, Digital Chocolate, and Zynga. Those were the big companies that I worked at. So David kind of covered the basic kind of like what we do in the department. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to share the development of a character. And that's kind of what I wanted to do tonight for you guys. So here, I'll go ahead and share. Forgive me, just give me 1 second for it to load up. Okay, so you guys have seen a lot of the art that the students do here. And so this is a character that I actually did or developed for a class. And basically I went around the room and talked to them about, hey, we have this character who's an animal, okay? And he kind of comes out of the water and evolves into this like superhuman, kind of superhero-ish, kind of Fortnite-ish kind of character. And so I'll be running it back and forth a little bit here, but the stuff that David was talking about is basically building those foundational skills. And the big thing that we need to do here at the school in the concept department, like David said, is we need to build on top of those skills that you have. So when you come in and you don't think you can draw, I saw somebody in the chat saying that they can barely draw a stick figure. So we have drawing boot camp classes that teach you how to draw doors, cars, trees, animals, the human figure, just to get that basic drawing kind of style. And before you ramp up to doing characters, we need to make sure that you have that foundation of figure drawing. Figure drawing is kind of the key to drawing anything. It gives you good, it helps you kind of gain a good eye for proportion and volume, and helps you build those skills so you can draw those props, those environments, those creatures, the kind of stuff that I'm showing you right now. And this takes a long time. Drawing does not come overnight. It takes a lot of practice. I've been drawing my whole life. And every year I feel that I get better and better at it. Even as an adult, as a professional, looking back at some of my professional work, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I turned that in and that actually got into a game. You know, and so looking back on it and looking at how far I've come 10, even 20 years ago. Your art just scales as you go. But the more you draw every single day, and I know it seems like a chore, but if this is something that you want to do as your career and you're committing to it, you need to be drawing every single day. Okay. And so this drawing was done in Procreate. I use it on the go. I use it to teach. There's a lot of stuff to do here with this program. And so if you guys are looking for like a tablet, I know that some of the Intuos tablets are a little cheaper. And some of you guys might want to use like the big Wacom, Cintiqs, that kind of stuff. So if you end up coming to the school and you're looking for a tablet, you don't have to get one of those big fancy screens that you draw on. You can get like the Intuos 4, the Intuos 5, or the Intuos 6. Those are perfectly acceptable. And they actually use those in the studios too. This one was drawn on the iPad. Like I said, I carry this everywhere I go. It's kind of like a portable sketchbook for me, but I can do finished drawings on it. And so that was the process of doing it. Like a lot of the art that you guys just saw, we end up taking these characters and developing them in a full turnaround. Okay. You have to think about who they are, what they are, and start describing the narrative. And everything you build on those characters tells a story. And you need to start thinking about the whole story. So you're not just drawing cool stuff. You have to be drawing stuff for a purpose, because everybody who's going to be, you know, vying for those jobs in those studios, the studios are looking for people who can think creatively. Okay. And they can get those ideas down on the screen, down on paper, and they can make those creative decisions. That's what it's like being a concept artist. Now, the coveted job of being a character artist is something that you get later on. And I'm glad David brought it up, because props and environments are the way to go. You need to be doing characters, props, and environments. And that's just across the board. It's something that you need to do. So you can be, you know, available or, you know, kind of, you know, ready to work in any studio that you can find a job. Okay. So yeah, it seems a little messy right here, but it's kind of a little bit more technical. You need to make sure that, you know, things are done in the turnaround. And so these characters work, they can run, they can jump, they can do everything that you want that character to do. It's just all about building the foundational anatomy, and then building that character out, and then building the story on top of it. Okay. So there's just one example. I have one more. So what we do in one of the character classes that I teach is I have the students build 2 character packs. And what I mean by that is the students will write a narrative, they'll write a story, they'll come up with the character, they'll give them a full backstory, and then they will design 2 to 3 characters for those story, giving them props, giving them vehicles, giving them environments, and that's your midterm and final projects. And in that specific class, they're building out unique projects where I'm putting it on you guys, the student, to come up with whatever kind of story or piece that you want in your portfolio that you haven't developed yet. And so this is, I think, a really unique class where you can go in and you can start developing. And so this is, once again, from that class, and I was kind of showing, you know, the different proportions here and different things you can do. We don't just do stylized, we do realistic. As you guys saw in the reel, we do, you know, painted, we do cell shaded, we do line work. Line work is key. That's really where you guys need to focus, because you don't have, if you don't have good lines and you start painting something, it's not going to turn out right. You have to have a really good foundation to get that going. Okay. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show you guys. I'm going to pass it off to Jason Wiesner. Okay. He's our online director and a great game designer.
Not. Hey, hopefully everyone can hear me now. My name is Jason Wiesner, and I'm the director of online for the School of Game Development. And I'm also a game designer. I have over 25 years of experience in the game industry. And I thought I would talk a little bit about that tonight, about how I got into the game industry. And I think it's important. Like, it would be great to hear that from everybody at some point during your time at school. But I think it's important to tell people how you got your start, because then people can see, like, hey, that's a parallel to something that's going on in my life. That's something that I have experience with. Maybe this is for me, right? So let me get started here. Hopefully everyone can see that. This is called Wheezy's Guide to Hustling. And what is hustling? Hustling is a skill, right? And hustling is all about putting yourself in the right place at the right time. It's all about recognizing opportunities, taking opportunities, and making opportunities. That's what it's about. And it's a skill, which means you have to get good at it. And a lot of sort of like our success stories with students who've graduated and gotten into the game industry have been people who hustle, and that's why they get the great jobs. They find those opportunities. So that's kind of like what this little story of my life is going to be about. That's me when I am 13 years old. And that bowl cut is courtesy of my mom. She gave great bowl cuts. And on the television back there, you'll see, if you can barely see it, there's a score there. Now, back then, at the bottom of the screen, you might actually see the Activision logo. If you wanted to get like a high score or something like that, you would play a game, get the high score, take a picture, and send it to Activision. And then if that was the high score, they would send you like a cool little patch that you could sew on your jacket. So I was full on Mr. Video Game Nerd if I was going to take the time to play a game and take a photograph of it and mail it somewhere. Also during this time, I spent a lot of time at arcades, playing arcade games all the time. My $1 a week allowance was 4 quarters, which is 4 games. So that's where all the money went. And if I started mowing lawns or washing cars or delivering papers, it was so that I could play more games. Same time, my dad brought a computer home, said he was going to start doing the family's bookkeeping. He didn't do that. He also said he was going to write the great American novel, which he also didn't do, at least on that computer. I took it over and started playing games and started making games. And the way I got into making games initially was I wanted to cheat on RPGs. So I had some really early RPGs where my characters were not balanced that great and their stats were terrible. And so I figured out how to go into the files and find that data and hack into it and change it. So that is how I taught myself some programming back then. All right, let's keep going. This is San Diego State University, which is where I went to college. And it was a great place at the time. We're talking like the late 80s, which was a pretty cool time in America in a lot of ways. And this was the right place for me to be. It was like a combination of art, like music, writing, business, technology, like all sorts of stuff there. I'll be honest, I spent a lot of my time in the arcade that was right near the campus. I spent a lot of time in the bowling alley, which was awesome. They had amazing concerts. There was great places to eat around there. It was a fantastic experience. maybe I could have done a little better educationally, but we'll get back to that. This was the right place for me to be. And by being here, I met this guy who was a friend of a friend who said, would you like to have a job in film? Which sounds a little sketchy, but I'm like, tell me some more details. And he said that there was a local technology firm that did colorization of black and white movies. And I could work like a graveyard shift there from midnight till 7 in the morning, which would fit right in with my studies at school and all the time I was playing at the arcade. So it sounded pretty cool. I went and did that. Here's what it looks like. It's kind of crazy. At school, you'll learn Adobe Photoshop, and we used like sort of like a very early version of it. So you had the black and white film, and then you would have a color overlay that went on top of it, and you had to color it by hand. And 30 frames a second times minutes times an entire TV show or a movie takes a while to do that, right? It's pretty crazy. But it was a fun job, and midnight to 7 in the morning was not the greatest shift ever, but it allowed me time to do a lot of other things during the day, like continue to check out video games and things. So it was a great job. I met a ton of people at this job, and a lot of those people went on to work at DreamWorks and Pixar and Lucasfilm and all sorts of other places. So in my area in San Diego, like all sort of like the creative people worked at this company. So it was a really great opportunity. All right. This place is in a place called Kearny Mesa down in San Diego. And this is Victor's Cocktails. I don't even think it's called Victor's anymore. But it was a cool little place. Since I worked swing shift till 7 in the morning, the bars opened at 8. So me and a bunch of my coworkers would go sleep in our cars in the parking lot for a half hour, then go have a few beers and play some pool. And one of those times when I was playing, one of my coworkers brought her boyfriend to play pool. He seemed like a super cool guy. As we were talking, we played pool on several occasions. He heard me talk about video games all the time. And one morning, he says, hey, if you quit talking about video games all the time, I'll get you a job at my company. Because he was working at a company called Blue Sky that did work for Sega. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can honor that side of the agreement. Good. So I did that. He brought me in. So I was still working the colorizing job, but I also worked another job during the day, which was as a tester. And it was on this project, which, in case you can't tell by my accent, I'm from England. And in England, football is soccer. In America, football is like this other thing that I can't quite get into. So when I initially thought I was going to be a tester on football, I thought it was soccer. And when I sat down and started playing this, I was a little bit bummed out. No offense if you like football. My job as a tester was to make sure that all these little players on the field went exactly where they needed to go for every defensive and offensive play. And if one of them didn't, I reported it to the programmer and they fixed it. So that was my job. Now, when I talk about opportunity, recognizing opportunity means that you're in the right place at the right time and something is happening that could be like a huge positive change in your life. And you got to recognize when those moments happen. This was one of those. I recognized that I had my foot in the door at a video game company, and this was like a dream come true for me. And I'm like, I'm going to make the most out of this opportunity. So I made sure that when I went and reported a bug to the programmer, I then hung out with the programmer and watched how he did things and asked him questions. And he would answer. He was super cool. Then he found out that I knew something about programming. So when I was done with the tester job, they offered me a full-time position as a programmer. So by recognizing that opportunity, I got my first full-time gig, which was cool. That's me again, holding the dinosaur right there. That's a crazy picture. Man, I have hair in that picture. That's so wild. Anyway, I'm holding a little model dinosaur because this is one of my first big projects, which is a Jurassic Park game. I'd read the book, but I hadn't seen the movie yet. But the word on the street was that the movie was going to be awesome. So we worked on the Sega Genesis version, which was cool. And that was my first job as a programmer. And I had to set up all the player has all these little sprites that are set up for all, it's like walking, running, jumping. So I had to set all those up, and then I had to hook up all the controls. So I did programming for like controls and sort of like UX. And while I was doing it, I discovered I wasn't really into it. I didn't like it that much. So after this project, this company did like the work I did on that project, even though I wasn't into it. And from that point on, I became a designer. So I was the first game designer at the company. Game design, as I explained to a lot of women I dated before I met my wife, is a combination of architecture, writing, and programming. And it's like those three things put together, and some art as well. So that's what design basically is. Jurassic Park was my first professional success. I think we sold like 250,000 copies in the first week, which is pretty crazy back then. I will be honest, not everything I've worked on has been very successful. I've worked on a few things that have sold less than 10 copies, so everything balances out in life. More networking, I'll leave you with a few other things. That first company I was at, the two most important people that I knew at that company were the receptionist up front and the marketing dude. And the reason is because anytime somebody stepped through the door of our office that was from another company, like another developer, publisher, hardware manufacturer, whatever, I would make sure I got introduced to that person and I got to know them. And so those two people were the most important people in my network at that time. I met like people from like Konami, Capcom, Sega, like people from all over the place, all super cool people, right? So I took advantage of that networking. Because of that networking, my first big professional job was at Activision, like in the late 90s. So all of that hustling, all of that recognizing opportunity, knowing the right people, all of that stuff resulted in me being at Activision. And I will leave you with one last example of hustling. Activision, I interviewed there as a junior designer. And that day, on the day I went up there for my interviews, I interviewed with 20 different people. And every single person or group of people I interviewed with would ask me who I had talked to so far. So I had to remember everybody's names. So when I was interviewing, I made sure I wrote down everybody's name so I would never forget. This picture you're seeing up here is one of the crappiest games I've ever played in my entire life. It's called Time Commando. It was on the PlayStation 1. It was an early Activision console title. Garbage. Don't ever play it. It's terrible. But halfway through my day, they got us like a lunch they brought in because I was one of like, I think 10 designers that were interviewing at the same time. They brought us like a lunch. Then they put us in this room that had all their latest console games. And then they said, hey, if you want, you can try out some of these games. And they left. So they left us all in there. I was the only one who actually like just ate a little bit. And the rest of the time I played every game that was in there. And the other guys who were in there, they didn't play any games. They ate lunch and they talked to each other. Guess who got the job? Yep, the guy eating the sandwich, talking to all those people. No, I'm just kidding. I got the job. So there's some examples of hustling and a few tips and sort of like what the industry is like a little bit and how I got into it. So if you have any questions on anything like this, I'm an open book. You can ask me anything. I'll answer it.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Yeah, who should we go to? We should go to Michael or Scott?
I'll take it.
Scott.
Okay,
I'll take
let's
the
go
football.
to Scott Birkencotter.
You got it. Hey guys, am I on? My name is Scott Birkencotter. I'm the programming lead here. I kind of like a lot of the story that Jason was telling, kind of about where he came from and things like that. So I think it's worth mentioning, a little bit about how I came to be a programmer and generally speaking, a game developer. And it's funny because back when I was a kid, I was writing my own RPGs as well. If you were to sort of sample what I was doing at any given time when I should have been doing homework or in class or something, I was probably scribbling on graph paper and drawing little maps and coming up with formulas for, damage formulas and that kind of stuff. Just coming up with all kinds of mechanics for little RPG games and things like that. And like a lot of the sort of theme that you might be noticing going through this is that not all of us get into games right away, knowing that that's the thing for us. Sometimes we have to sort of try a few things and then realize that those things aren't for us. And for me, it was, I really love learning languages. I became a linguist. I studied linguistics and I minored in anthropology. And then I realized I didn't want to do any of those things as a career. What I really wanted to do was going back to making those little RPGs on paper, but obviously doing them for real. And so that journey kind of took me down the path of, okay, what are some of my favorite games? I looked up Blizzard as I was finishing my bachelor's degree Like before I'd even gotten the degree in hand, I was looking up Blizzard and seeing, okay, what kind of skills do I need to get a job over here? And so I enrolled myself in a junior college and took a game design development program there, like a 1-year program or year and a half, I think it was. And, I didn't really know what part of it was for me. I learned a little bit of art. I learned a little design and programming. I kind of settled somewhere between design and programming. And just over time, I've gravitated to more of the programming side. And I'm an indie developer, which means that I don't have a lot of really cool stories about working at these great companies. I did do testing at like Electronic Arts, at Visceral Games back when they were just ears. Things like that. But most of my career has been working on these tiny little games on tiny little teams. And that's kind of the way that I like it, because AAA isn't for everybody. So that's kind of the world that I represent, is just having an idea and a kernel and, meshing with a couple of people and working together on something great. Hamburger. So what is programming is really the rest of what I want to talk about here, because that's what I represent here. I'm the programming lead. And I'll talk a lot about design in this as well, because I have, spent time in design, and honestly, designers and programmers are really just two sides of a single coin. So really, I think there's a lot of interesting overlap between design and programming. And I think a big reason you guys might be here is because you're trying to figure out where you belong. And, that's kind of the whole story. So anyways, let me just sort of pull this up super quick. I've got some slides, as I do. That's the one. Hang on. You'd think I do this for a living. Anyway, programming. Yeah. So imagine that there's a car, and this car is basically think of this as our video game. Really what I want to do is pull apart design and programming, because there is so much overlap between the two. So in a nutshell, if you wanted to sort of explain what a programmer does, the programmer is going to be the guy building the engine, building the brakes and the axles and sort of all the parts that make the car work on the inside, while the designers are, looking at it more from the outside and thinking, okay, this is what I want it to look like. It should look sleek. This is kind of how I want the interface to work. This is how the steering wheel should feel. This is how, the experience of driving the car should be. So more of the thinking about the user's experience with the car and making sure that the car is a good driving experience and that kind of stuff. And then, so if we take that more out of the analogy zone and into the actual real world of what game developers do, game designers and programmers in particular, things designers do, I can come up with a little list here of really vague stuff. They make the game work. They write some code. They test some stuff. They solve design problems. If there's issues that come up, they help fix them. And also technical bugs. Like there's bugs in the way the game works. It doesn't work the way that it's supposed to. They help figure that out. Some things programmers do. Well, guess what? We make games work. We write code. We test things. We solve little problems with the game, and both technical and design wise. And so that's what I mean when they say there's a lot of overlap. And it doesn't help that video games as a sort of industry and as a science rose from the world of programming. And sort of in the early days of video games, you can basically make the assertion that programmers were the only game developers. And it's only been, maybe 30 years or so that the design job even existed in video games. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but and artists as well kind of started to enter into the picture. The big diverse world that we see today when we look at the game development industry is a very different thing from what it was up front. So the reason why I like to bring up designers versus programmers is we often get people coming into our program, the programming degree in particular, who sort of have this misconception about what it is. So that's basically why I want to make sure that I bring it up. So if I were to try to describe really what it's all about, you can think of it as a very simple diagram here. We've got the sort of creative aspects of making the games. You got the more technical aspects, and designers are on sort of the more creative side of that spectrum. Programmers are on the more technical side of the spectrum. But that doesn't mean that we don't overlap in what we do and what we care about. It's just kind of what angle we approach the problem from is the best way to describe it. So if we wanted to kind of get a bit more specific and really pull those things apart in terms of what designers do, designers make the game fun. They spend a lot of time writing and sort of explaining and just being able to document all the ways in which the game should work in order to be fun. So there's a lot of writing there, a lot of communication skills certainly required. they will write what we sometimes call quick and dirty code to make things just to test and sort of make sure that if the game does work the way that you think it should, that it actually is fun. Because you can often have an idea that you think is fun, but once you get it to actually mechanically start working, you realize it's not so fun, or at least it needs some work sometimes. The designers will work with the tools that the programmers write for them. They'll write a bit more code sometimes, or often, I should say, not sometimes, but designers are writing code very often. Mainly the way that I would describe the way that designers write code is they're sort of using little knobs and flipping switches and just using things that the programmers have exposed for them. So if you think back to that sort of car analogy, you think the gear shift, the programmer's sort of deciding how that gear shift should feel, but it's all just an exposed piece that connects down to something underneath that the programmers spend a ton of time making sure works great. And on the other side, things programmers do is think more about, okay, how do we make sure that game's efficient? So while designers are making it fun, we make sure that it's actually able to run at 60 frames a second. We also think about things like making sure the game is scalable, meaning that as the game grows, as we keep adding more levels, as we keep adding more skins and more characters and whatever it is, that the game continues to be stable, that it's still efficient, that it can still run 2, 3, 4 years from now when it's still under development. That the code that we've written is still able to handle all the changes that have been made, which adds to it being flexible and durable as well. Here's a big one that I think people need to understand about programming is that basically a big part of our job is to solve things that often are considered very boring, but are absolutely critical to make games these magical things that we all love. And I'll show you some examples of what I mean by that. But it's like understanding the math, understanding the science, understanding the real world well enough, as well as just what is a computer and how does it work on the inside and how can we use these parts to kind of create these wonderful experiences. And so you have to understand kind of a lot of those things, and you have to be very technical, and you have to have those math skills and things like that. Don't get into programming if you don't want to do math. I'll just tell you that up front. We are creative. It's not that we don't have ways of showing creativity, but the way that we express our creativity, I think Wheezy said that a designer's part architect. Programmers certainly use that analogy a lot as well. We talk a lot about the architecture of the code, which is really just a fancy way of saying that we find interesting and creative and sometimes very ingenious ways to organize the code to ensure that all of these needs of efficiency, scalability, flexibility, durability, all of those things are possible, that the code has these sort of areas where it can shift and move as the design of the game changes. And as often we'll take the code that's written for one game and then carry it over into the next game 2 years later and then continue doing that for a decade or two. And that's how things like the Unreal Engine burst into existence. Over time, it's not something that happens all at once. And then, of course, we also write down and communicate things. So you might be noticing some overlap here. We spend a lot of time writing down all these ideas that we've come up with about, okay, here's how the code should work in order to make sure that it's scalable and things like that. We draw diagrams. We also spend time collaborating and just making sure that the pieces work together. We collaborate not just with other programmers, but with designers and artists and other kinds of people. And I think I saw some people in chat were saying, I'm an artist but I'm also interested in code. And there's sort of a third option that I'm not really spending a lot of time talking about, but there's the technical art option, which are basically people who are artistically inclined, but also can do the math and the science and the programming and will build tools to make that stuff work really well. And so they're kind of people who straddle that line between artistic and very technical as well. And a lot of what we're saying applies to them. The truth is that if you just take one thing, which is code, and you say, okay, that's the thing I want to do, well, honestly, that doesn't help much because that doesn't narrow down where you're going to end up in terms of game development. You could do code as a designer. You can do code as a programmer. You can do it as a tech artist. You could even do it as a web developer or a UI artist. Concept artist a little bit less, but if you really wanted to, you could find a way to make that interesting. And really what we do is we make tools and enable the creativity of the more creative people in the field. And that's another way to look at what we do as programmers. So in terms of how we approach this, because programming, honestly, I'll be upfront, programming is a really hard degree. And so it's not something that you should just choose lightly. And so I want to just talk really briefly about how we kind of ease you into it. First year of programming, you're learning how to move a little robot through a virtual world. So this is actually an assignment from one of our early classes where you're controlling this little guy, which represents a robot walking through a maze, and he has to pick up each of these little dots, and you got to write the code to do all that. This is kind of what that code ends up looking like. And then this would be a tool that we give you to kind of test out that program and to make sure that it actually works the way that you want it to. And you can actually run through the code one step at a time and see, you know, if something's going wrong, what's causing that, right? And then moving on from that, we sort of go beyond, okay, how do we just make things work in a really basic sense? But let's talk about that architecture side of things. Let's talk about how we organize the code in order to make these moving parts that we are able to build in order to allow flexibility and to keep things moving as the design changes. And this would be an example of the kind of diagram we draw to sort of communicate our ideas with other programmers to kind of say, okay, this is how I kind of envision this thing working. What do you think? Or, you know, things like that. Was that Perl? That's actually that was a language called Karel, Karel. If you're interested, you can look it up. And then moving on from that, we kind of take those skills and we put them to test in more complex games. We'll build little mazes like this. You kind of have to squint to see it in this particular image, but you know, this is kind of like a roguelike where you'd walk through collecting treasure, maybe fighting things, avoiding traps, trying to get to the exit. You'll make these within the first year of the program, so it's pretty cool. By the second year, you're moving beyond just little characters, little letters and symbols on a screen to actually drawing and rendering 2D graphics, doing basic animation, doing even basic particle effects, and implementing the UI that the concept artists were drawing, a couple people ago. Building the menus and actually building the little like the code that would move the cursor through the menu and all that kind of stuff. Like you figure out all that stuff. We figure out how to get game controllers interfacing with the computer. And so we get very much into the gamey side of stuff. Also during that second year, we start to see that sort of other side of things, the side of things that isn't as glamorous, but is entirely critical. Like this right here is what we call a sorting algorithm, where it's basically visualizing or sort of illustrating an algorithm that would take a set of numbers and get them into order from smallest to largest. And you might not think that that's something that's really critical, but things like that are all over games. They're just sort of in the background, and you don't have to think about it because the programmers solve that stuff for you. But this is like often where that we separate the men from the boys, or the women from the girls, or whatever it is, right? Because this is the part where you have to actually take a lot of that math and sort of science and look at things in a different way and start to actually think as an engineer and less as a coder, because sometimes you hear the word coder and we sort of think, okay, that's someone who can write code, but programming is not just writing code. We already talked about how many different things go into programming. There's way more than that. So anyway, and then we move on to how do we get a bunch of like moving particles to go around on a screen. This is an example from an assignment in, I think, the latter half of the second year, where we give you a very poorly performing simulation of these little boxes. And if you can imagine these moving around the screen, that's basically all they do. But if you can also imagine that when you first get this program, it's running at 1, maybe 2 frames a second, and your job is to make it run at 60 frames a second. And all you have to do is to dig into the code and use the skills that you learn back on slides like this, and just sort of apply that to actual real world problems in something we call optimization. And that's really a lot of what goes into video games. And it's a lot of what sets video games apart from other areas of programming and software engineering, is that if your calculator doesn't run at 60 frames a second, no one's going to care. But if your games don't run at 60 frames a second, and some, esports pro somewhere out there loses because of lag or whatever it might be, then someone's going to be pissed. Someone's losing money over that. So, and then of course there's also the implementation of this UI stuff. This is where I mentioned earlier, like you build tools for people. So it's a lot about understanding other developers and realizing that other developers, like designers and artists and tech artists and everyone else, are the real audience for programmers. Like they're the people we're building for, because they're the ones who are actually going to use most directly the things that we use or that we create. And so understanding their needs, building tools for them is a big part of it. And I think The last thing that I have here is a short little video of a game that was created by our students in the third year, but like throughout the third and fourth years, you kind of put a lot of those skills to the test. You can learn things like graphics, AI, procedural generation, if you're wondering how those things work. I wonder if there's like a speed up. Yeah. And there's a lot of things going on in this video, and I just kind of like to show this one because this is made by all programmers. Sorry, I'm trying to find the playback speed, but it doesn't seem to want me to do that. There we go, double speed. Okay, so this is made by a team of programmers, and you can see a lot going into it. This is an example of a roguelike because it is procedurally generated, meaning every time you run, it's a little bit different. And you might think that that's just a simple matter of randomly choosing rooms and attaching them to each other, but it's way more than that. You got to understand how random number generation even works. You got to build separate systems to check and make sure that the rooms actually attach to each other. You got to make sure that the keys aren't hidden behind the doors they're supposed to unlock. It's basically, yeah, it's like a Binding of Isaac sort of clone, you could say. And then, of course, the design side of things is, okay, what would be some cool weapons for us to be shooting as we move through this maze? What would be some cool ways for enemies to act that kind of make us sort of act carefully or to think about our strategies and stuff like that? I've muted it, but there's music that plays. And so implementing the music is a part of either design or programming, depending on how deep you have to go with that. This is built in Unity, by the way, which is a game engine. And I think that's worth pointing out, actually, is that a lot of other programs will just have you learn something like Unity or Unreal, which are free game engines that you can just find. You can look them up today and start using them for free. But one thing that sets us apart is that we actually teach you how to make your own game engine here at the Academy. And so that's one of the things that very few programs are doing, to my knowledge. Anyways, I could sort of carry on, but I think that's basically what I wanted to get to there, which is just this idea that there's a lot that goes in there, and there's a lot of different sort of places you could settle into in game development. And if you're not sure which place is right for you, we design our curriculum around helping you make that decision as quickly as you can, because there's a pretty good chance that you might end up, not necessarily where you first fired, but maybe a couple degrees to the left or to the right. You might go from programming to design. You might go from design to tech art or something like that. Who knows? But anyways, that's my spiel. That's what programming is all about. And I think that's Mike's cue.
That is. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully we can get me up on there. And then, yeah, so I am Michael Witzel. I'm the director of esports for Academy of Art University. A lot of students, they'll call me by my gamer tag, Wits. So you can look me up if you want to at Wits31. But I started my career in IT. I started in 2005 and ended up going into the Marines and doing IT in the Marines as well. After the Marines, I graduated and I finished. Then I came to the Academy of Art and actually went through the game development program here. I graduated in 2014 with a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Game Design. I like straddling that between programmer and design. I like a lot of the scripting and programming side as well. But in 2016, we started up ArtU Esports here at the Academy. So let me just put that up. There we go. So these are just some photos to keep it a little bit interesting as I'm talking of our esports program. So what is esports? It's competitive video gaming. It's one of the fastest growing international phenomenons with millions of fans and billions of dollars being pumped into it. It's gaming events and live streaming. Services like Twitch and YouTube gaming are all part of this. And it takes basically, competitive gamers and makes them into stars in a way. But competitive gaming that is organized. That is what esports is all about, organizing the gaming behind it. What do we do in esports, though, here at Academy of Art? We do 3 different things, mostly. So we do competition, which is we do have teams. We have teams for League of Legends. We have teams for Overwatch. We're building a team for Valorant. And depending on the students at the time, we'll build a team for other games, maybe such as Call of Duty or Rocket League. But then we compete against other universities in North America, including Canada and everywhere. And our esports program has actually been ranked in the top 11 and top 12 esports programs out of all the other universities in North America. Then we get into the community side. So we have our game lounge. It's there for all the students in person to come in and play games in their off time. And what we do there is we'll have live events. We're always doing tournaments. We do about 3 tournaments every semester. And when we do those tournaments, we'll also invite other universities from the Bay Area in to compete with our students. And we're just trying to build up this whole community in the area of students to play games and have fun and socialize and network, because networking is definitely key for getting a job out there. But one thing that we do at all these events that we do is we drive education, esports education. We have our different majors from communications, game development, advertising, animations and visual effects, graphic design, music production and sound design, web design and new media, writing for film, TV, and digital media, as well as photography students, all will come in and help run these events. So we do have a class that does run for esports, which runs these events. And now that we are all online, we've been moved over to an online segment, and all our events are now running online. This past weekend, we actually did one for Among Us, where it was a game night. We had a bunch of students come in and they just played through Discord and, you know, had a great, awesome time playing Among Us there. But part of all this production and broadcasting of our events, these students in that education field, they're able to go out and get real jobs related to their majors, you know? So if you go into esports, or you want to go into esports and you choose a major such as one of those that I had listed there, you have a role right there in esports on our production team to get that real world experience. And then you could get hired by an esports organization if you wanted, or even going over to a game company and helping them run events as well. Students pursue their degree, their desired degree in the field of study here at the Academy of Art. And then we will have them tune that towards esports and then participate in these classes with esports. We want to empower you as a student to discover and define what esports is. You and everybody else who consumes esports, you have the ability right here to define what that is and make it what you think esports should be all about. Software and hardware we use, we have some professional equipment right there in our esports studio. We have an entire studio set up just to broadcast these events. We have something called the TriCaster. Right now online, we're using open broadcast software. So we're using OBS and a lot of other stuff right there. So if you're looking to join a team, we're going to have a sign-up process pretty soon, and we do sign-ups every semester that you're at the school. So we just go through every semester and try to make sure the teams are built up. So as a student, you have a chance to be on the team. Looking to hopefully have that scholarship funded in the near future, and looking to even expand our esports lounge for everybody here too. But that's about all I have right here about esports. And I'll kick it over to whoever's next.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much. David, who's next on the list?
That was everybody. But if you know what I'd like to do is if there's questions out there, I'd like to answer them. And if there's not, I'll just talk. So like everybody's been saying, you know, when students come into our program, the thing that we want everybody, doesn't matter what area you're going into, you need to learn your foundations. You need to get that part of your program started from the beginning. And as you move through the program, whether you're a concept artist, 3D artist, programmer, game designer, whatever you decide to choose, you will do those foundational classes, then you will do those classes that will make you better in those areas. And as you move through, we have classes near the end where you're actually all working together on a particular game. They're called collabs, where we're having everybody work together to make, they could be mobile games, they could be VR games, they could be PC games. We're in the process of starting to make PS4 and also looking at Xbox and the Nintendo Switch. So we have, I think the most we've ever done, which I don't know if we're going to do that again, is we've done about 8 games in one semester, which was a lot. But we also work with other departments as well. We have the animation department that works with us, so they're doing that part. We work with the music department. We built out a VR experience for the Norman Rockwell Museum a couple of years back that, all these different departments work together to create this piece. It went to 6 different museums across the United States. It went to Normandy, France for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And then we were invited to show the VR piece off at the White House. So it was a great experience for all the students. There was probably about 50 students that worked on the project. And it still shows at the Rockwell right now. And we're in the process right now of doing an AR project for them that hopefully will run this summer, depending on how things go. So, the games that we end up making, we make a lot of different games. Platformers, pretty much you name it, we've probably made it. And we've had students that have started making their games at school, decided to keep working on them after they graduated. We have some that are up on Steam. So, some of the students just keep working together afterwards.
Hey, David, I've had some students in the chat that were expressing that they live out of state, they live far away, or maybe they couldn't be an on-site student. So some of the questions are like, do we teach these programs online? And what's it like to be an online student? Am I going to be missing out if I'm online? So does anybody want to speak a little bit to what the experience is as an online student here?
Who wants to take that one? Go ahead, Jason.
What we've really been trying to do with the department recently is we're trying to make the online and on-site experience as much the same as possible, right? There are always logistical issues why on-site is slightly different than online and reasons why people take the different formats too. But we're really trying to make it so that everybody online and on-site gets the same information, the same experiences, like everything, just trying to make it completely compatible. I think the best way for you to approach online classes, we have people who, I remember back when I drove all crazy, I used to get speeding tickets and I'd have to take online driver's school or whatever to get the ticket written off. And, on that sort of thing, you can just kind of go up there and hang out and click on the button every 5 minutes and get through it and you're done, right? That's the wrong way to approach online school here. So what I've been trying to do is encourage students to reach out to other students in their classes, reach out to the instructor. We've been trying to do like Zoom sessions for online classes. I do one every Saturday for my classes where they can just wander in and ask questions and stuff like that. But, the way to think of it is online, a lot of people don't really understand that there's like a community that we're trying to form there of, people who do projects together, people who talk to each other in class and outside of class, forming those same sort of networking bonds that, I was talking about about how I got my job. That's the kind of network you want to create, whether you're on site or online, and we can help you with both of those. So I hope that answers your question. Bottom line, don't be afraid to take online classes. They're great, but they also require you to be a little bit more involved since it's in that format. But if you do, it totally pays off.
Yeah. And Jason, the thing I would just say is that, taking courses online sometimes becomes inevitable, especially when you're trying to balance your schedule and you're trying to basically make sure that you have all of your time accounted for and you're able to keep up with just life as it's thrown at you. The one thing I want to emphasize to students is we do these online workshops. One thing I'll tell you is just check one of them out. We actually demonstrate live online courses so you can see how everything works. One of the big parts of our online courses I just want to throw out there, everybody, is that the content that we use for our online courses is custom and it's made in-house. We're not outsourcing to YouTube and lynda.com and pulling different assets to create a course. We actually create our courses in-house. So the content that you're learning from is made specifically for that course through the academy, which is very different than just finding links to read and write on different types of platforms. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the thing when there's online classes, we write the online classes. So we have our instructors. I mean, yeah, exactly. So that's the thing you have to think about too, is all these, whether they're full-time instructors or they're part-time instructors, we've all worked in the games industry and film too. So all these instructors, so basically the first day you walk into class is like networking. It really is. I mean, all these people that are teaching the classes have been working in the industry for a long time. They know other people. They know people at the different studios. So it's really like it's the first day of your job. So you really need to work at it and treat it like that. And you can get a lot out of it.
David, I want to see if maybe you can take this question. It's a question from Colton over on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
Is visual development a part of games, or would concept art be a better course to take if wanting to get into game art?
So concept art for games. Well, actually, I'm going to have Brian answer that one.
Yeah. No, the visual development track is specifically for film and television. And the way you develop characters, environments, props, and the story is very different than the way you would develop those types of things for a game. Now, the lines are getting a little blurry right now, just because of, the introduction of, the PS5, the Xbox X and the Xbox S, that kind of thing. The way that you're telling stories and the narratives that you're building and the characters and the environments that you're creating, they're all a lot more advanced than they used to be, but you're still designing things in a different way with a different aesthetic and a different mind behind it. And so when you're designing an object for a game versus a movie, you need to design the entire object. The camera is only going to show you one thing when you're watching a movie, but when you're in a game, you have the freedom to be able to move around in the world. You're seeing absolutely everything. And so you have to identify and create your worlds with a little bit more precision sometimes, because everybody is going to be scrutinizing everything instead of the camera and the director showing you just what you're seeing on that flat screen. So if you want to get into games, the concept art in the game development is probably the better route. If you're more interested in television and film, the viz dev is the way to go. But there are some students that take both, and so they'll either go to viz dev or they'll come to concept art and they'll take classes back and forth, and that happens sometimes too.
Yeah, exactly. There was a question about developing AR skills. So I'll take that one. So we have classes so in the technical art side of things, we have classes, and like Scott was mentioning earlier, there's the classes with programming and rigging and different areas of technical art. But one of them, so Phil Koffold is our lead for technical art. And he has classes that will teach VR and AR. So, you got to start out knowing how to work in let's say the Unreal Engine or in Unity, and you have to learn how to code in those particular engines. But also you need to learn how the Oculus 2s work, or there's so many things out there right now. There's some glasses called Nreal. It's not Unreal, it's Nreal, but they basically look like regular glasses with they tether off the back to your phone, and they run AR. So I had seen them at CES a few years back, and they worked great. And they were just a lot. The HoloLens that we use HoloLens 1s. They're just really bulky, but even though they're bulky, you learn how to create AR with that hardware. So yes, we do teach those particular classes for that. You're welcome. Does anybody else have any questions?
I written down that question for you, but you caught it. I had actually a question that came in earlier, was from Forrest out there. Forrest said, how would someone who wants to get into designing narratives for games best go about that?
Jason. Your mic.
I heard that the #1 saying of 2020 is going to be "you're on mute."
Yep.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to hear it. Okay, so the best thing to do is, I hope you're writing right now anyway, is if you want to get into writing for games, just start writing now, like all the time. Like, you can write like fan fiction or come up with missions for games you like, but just start doing it anyway. We have classes in our department which do teach writing for games that were written by people who actually write for games, so they're good classes. Most of our other classes that have anything to do with, producing a game as a team or as an individual or anything like that, we always stress story and narrative. So there are opportunities to have some exposure to it then as well. But the #1 advice, as somebody, I've written a lot of narrative for games in the past. The reason I've been able to do that is because I just write all the time anyway. I just write constantly. So if you get into that habit, we can teach you the skills to refine it in a way that it can be used for game development.
Wouldn't you agree that consuming as well, like just watch movies, play games?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
I tell everybody
Design in general.
You should all be like a sponge. Like
Yeah.
whatever like anybody talks about, and you don't know what it is, you make a little note to yourself and you check it out when you get home. You look it up. If you hear about something that's cool, like a TV series or a podcast or a book, game, comic book, like whatever, just soak it all up, because all of that ends up becoming sort of like shorthand for game development. When we're talking about concepts and things like that, a lot of the time we can make reference to something we're all interested in or have had exposure to. And it's like, it makes the conversation take up a lot less space doing it that way. So totally what Scott says.
Well, and I think too that all of us watch a lot of movies. We play games. We talk about movies. We talk about games. I can't really, let me rephrase that. So for the longest time, I just didn't have time to finish a game. I play all kinds of games. I play a lot of mobile games, but I don't always have time to finish all the way through. Until recently, when I played Ghosts of Tsushima. I finished that game. It was a great game, but that was probably the only game I've finished in, I don't know, years. And the thing is too, like, and others can chime in on this, when you're working on games and you're making the game and you're playing that game every day, when the game releases, you're probably not going to play it.
True.
Yeah.
Although when I was in QA on the Simpsons game, I actually really enjoyed just sort of playing through and testing all the limits on things. People say that about testing, that you get sick of it, but I never did.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's great. Somebody asked me what I did on Evolution. When I was at
That was Brian.
That was me.
Oh, that was right.
He has a ghost account.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was working at PDI, I wore a bunch of different hats at that studio. So when I first got there, I built out with a team of people to do the first Shrek website before the movie came out. So we built that all out. And then I moved over to work in production. So I was working on the production side of things. So I was making sure that everybody was getting their work done on Evolution, on Bagger Vance, on the Mexican, on the Deep End. Did some work on Minority Report. So, but I was on the production side of that at that time. So that's what I did. And that's the thing about film. Depending on what studio you're at and how many people are working on the project, if you're doing the visual, like let's say you're doing the visual effects side of things, when you get credit on a movie, the main studio that's making the movie may say you can only have 10 people on your credits list. Well, there may have been 50. So they're going to pick the most senior people to be on that list. So you may not even get credit for it and you worked on it. That's happened a bunch of times. That was one of the main reasons I left film. Because when I've worked on games, I always get credit for what I did. And then on which one did, oh yeah. It was Project Snowblind. We even gave credit, and this happens a lot. We gave credit to whoever was born that year. So my son was born that time. So he's got a credit in the game as well, along with a lot of kids that were born then.
Here's a question from Ronald out there. He says, who decides on what new titles come out? He said, who actually says, yep, we should make this game?
Are you talking in studio or us?
Let's say
as a school.
Let's say in studio. I'm guessing it's in studio.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have Jason answer that one.
I've sat on both sides of that table. I've sat on the side of the table where it's like, hey, I have an idea, give us $1 million to make it. And I've been on the other side of the table where I say, your idea is not good enough. Let's see the next one. And that person doesn't get $1 million. So what happens is you look at a company like Activision or Electronic Arts, is they've got an annual operating budget, right? Out of that budget, they have it split up into different project slots, right? So you have like, there's like annual sports franchises, for example. Like if you're at 2K, you'll get 2K basketball. There is probably, if you're at Activision, there's a Call of Duty slot because they try to get one to come out every year, right? So there's like those are franchises. There are franchise slots that are filled annually already and already have a budget. Then you have money in addition to that, which you can use for other projects. Those other projects may be something that you have specifically heard about and gone and gotten, like Activision went and acquired Blizzard. That's an example, right? Or they may be things where people come to you, which is when I've been on the other side of the table. You get developers coming to publishers and basically pitching their projects, right? Within that leftover amount, after all the franchises, not all those projects get the same amount of money. There may be money allocated for a very big project, a bunch of smaller like mobile titles, or like downloadable content for something that already exists. And so that's basically how they plan it out. Every year has a slate of things that are part of a franchise coming out or things that are new in development. I hope that makes sense.
So ultimately, it's decided by the company, a panel of select people, et cetera.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how I got. I mean, talk about opportunities. Sorry to sound like a broken record, but when I worked at Crystal Dynamics, one of the people from our parent company, IDOS, was cruising around, and a marketing guy. And like I said, it's always good to get to know like people like marketing, receptionists, like all those people, because they know a lot of people, right? So the marketing guy goes, hey, Weez, up in the city today, there's an IDOS product review where a bunch of different companies come in and pitch, and the regular people who do it are out of town. Would you like to do it? And I'm like, no, you know what? I'm just going to get some lunch with some friends. No, of course. I said, yes, I am going to go do this. and I did it. It was one of the greatest days of my entire life in the industry. It was a blast from start to finish. And I got that experience I would never have gotten any other way. No other way would I have gotten that.
Exactly.
There were actually a few years where we did a thing called pitch night where we would actually do a little simulation of this whole process. I hope we can bring it back.
We will.
Yeah.
I think those were the thing with, well, why don't you tell them a little bit about pitch night?
I mean, the whole idea behind pitch night was everyone has their little pet project that they want to get sort of feedback on. And not only that, but we also have those collab classes in the 4th year of our program where we're always looking for projects. So the whole idea was you got an idea, come pitch it in front of a panel of people from the industry. They will grill you, they'll critique you, as if you were a professional, and you learn quite a bit from that experience. Got a lot of positive feedback about it and a lot of sort of learning experience out of it for everybody, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's the thing too, is, we're always building games and we're always coming up with, what do we want to do? And it helps to have the students come up with, if they have an idea and we think it's viable, then we'll build it. Like right now, how many, what do we got? Like 5-6 games that we're building, that we're building in the collabs. But then like some of the classes that Jason teaches, they're building games. How many games are they building right now in like 606 or
we have this class, this rapid game development class that I teach, and you make a game in a different genre every week for the first half of the semester. And then the second half of the semester, you're going to take 2 or more of the successful projects you made during the first half of the semester and combine them into one and make a more polished game. So everyone seems to like that, although they find it's very challenging because you've got like, literally when you get everything done in the week, you may have like 2 days to make a game or something like that. So it's not only good for rapidly developing things, it's also good for learning how to manage your own time so you can get this stuff done too.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Did you see that one from Joshua?
I wanted to answer a question that Sable asked like 10 minutes ago. So Sable asked, is there a segment for storyboarding in the concept art portion of game development? No, we don't do that in the game development department. We do talk about, writing character write-ups, doing your story, talking about your narrative, writing. Like Jason said, writing is key. Not only for designers and people that want to write narratives, but it's also key for artists. That's something that I had to learn the hard way. I hate writing. I'm really bad at it. But I got a lot better at it once I started writing all the time. And so that's a big thing. But in terms of storyboarding, you can take those elective classes and use them and take them from the animation department. But that being said, like David and I, we do, like, I draw comic books on the side. That's a big thing that I do. I know all about storyboarding. I just finished 2 storyboarding jobs earlier this year, one for a film and one for TV. You know what I mean? So it's not, you can kind of cross-pollinate in those things and do, different jobs across film, television, and games. And then what was the other question you said, David? I'm sorry, I was trying to stay up.
Joshua asked, as a concept artist, what are some ways to get your portfolio seen by art directors if you don't necessarily have any contacts?
Networking, like Jason talked about. Honestly, get your art on Instagram, get it on ArtStation. Go to as many meetups as you can. I know it's a little difficult now, but GDC is offering a lot of, and that is the Game Developers Conference. They are offering, I'm jumbling on my words. They are offering a lot of online versions of what they're doing, leading into, I think they have it in March again, don't they? Or did they extend it into?
GDC is going to be in July.
In July. Okay, so they extended it into next summer.
Right.
But yeah, just networking with people anywhere you can, honestly. Looking for people on LinkedIn. I always say Instagram and ArtStation is the way to go.
Miles wants to know who in the game industry comes up with the ideas? All of us. I mean, if our students come up with the ideas come up at the studios. I mean, it really depends on.
They can come from anywhere.
They come from anywhere.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Miles, I'll be honest with you. Most of them come from me. So
that's probably true.
No, they can come from, to everyone's point, they can come from anywhere. And I hate working at companies where there's some sort of pecking order to who can come up with ideas or not.
Right.
My thing is, it's not who's right, it's what's right. So if an idea comes from like, you know, some like part-time tester or whatever, I'd be like, hey, yeah, let's take a look at it.
Yep, exactly. So there's another question. So here's the thing for, I think it was for Mohammed. So you graduated as an architect, you're a graduate of architecture. We have a lot of 3D environment artists that have been architectures in the past that have come in to learn how to do 3D environments, and they've turned out to be great. As long as you can learn how to model, they've turned out to be great 3D artists. So I know one in particular, he had graduated, I forget what school he went to for architecture. He came to our Masters of Fine Arts program. He went through the program. He worked at a couple of places before he landed his job working on Call of Duty at Sledgehammer. And now he does a good portion of the environments at Sledgehammer Games on Call of Duty. So being an architect going into 3D environment helps a ton. Now, we have that for a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and we have that for a Master's of Fine Arts, but we don't have like a specific like a certification degree or a certification program. You could come and take classes for that, for those particular things, or you could come and just get a degree. I hope that answers your question. Any other questions?
I see that there's a question. What's a challenge that you deal with in the industry as an artist in the field? The biggest issue that I had was there's a lot of people out there that are vying for the same job as you. And so you need to, like I said before, when I was talking about your art, you need to be as creative as possible. You need to stay up. You need to be drawing every day, like all the time. Please don't, once you start creating your portfolio, don't sit on it and just think that there, it's done. I've created it. Now I'm going to get a job. You need to be working every day at your craft. There's a lot of students that have part-time jobs and they're going to school and, they're coming in, they're doing the class. And even in their part-time, I encourage them to keep working on personal projects. And I think personal projects coupled with what you learn in the classes are the best route to take. And how that, fuels into the answer that I'm giving you is, even as an artist that's been working in the industry for years, there's still competition out there. And so staying up to date with what the other studios are doing, new methods. I don't really worry about software. If you can draw, I can teach you how to use the new software. I'm not worried about that. As an art director, I wanted to hire people that were better artists and better people. And so aside from the art, just being a nice person got me really far in being an artist and just being agreeable and just being nice and working well with people. That's my biggest advice to you.
Yeah, Brian's pretty cool.
Thanks.
I was also going to say, you've got to be prepared to take a lot of criticism for your art, right? Whether you're a designer, you're an artist, programmer, everybody takes criticism, right? You got to be able to take it and give it and realize that nothing is personal, it's professional, right? And you've got to accept that sometimes you will do great at things. Sometimes you will not do so great at things, right? That's part of the learning process, right? And for me personally, failure is something that I always learn a lot from, right? And when I'm looking at my own projects, I'd rather know things that are wrong with my projects than things that are right with my projects. I already know what I do well, so tell me what I do crappy and I'll get better at it, right? It makes me better at what I do. So that's something I just wanted to add to what Brian said.
Thanks, Jason. And I'm actually lucky enough because I do these every single Tuesday. So I've seen so many different faculty members and directors and you name it. The one thing I can just tell everybody out there, there's really just no secret to this. Like, it doesn't matter if you're in jewelry or if you're in game or animation or whatever. Every single person you're going to talk to is going to tell a story about how they worked hard, how they were like giving up sleep, how they were getting up early, how they talked about how he made a choice to go to something rather than pass on an opportunity. And all I would tell you guys is that you need to either be super talented, work super hard, combination of both, go to school. Going to school can make a huge difference because you get the education you need, you get the training you need, you get the networking you need, and that's going to open up those doors for you. So I would just tell you, even if you choose another university for this, do something that's going to put you on track to actually make those advances in your career, and just, get it right the first time. Pick something that you're going to really love to do for a living and just do it. I would tell you, don't go through several different doors before you take that chance on yourself and try something that you're going to actually enjoy.
Well, and
yeah, I was going to just throw it back to you, David, for that one. I was going to say,
and that's exactly what Hector was saying. So when I got out of high school, I had always wanted to go into animation. I always wanted to be an animator. I mean, games were just coming out because I graduated from high school in '81. But I didn't go into what I really wanted to be doing, and I was always good at the science side of things, so I went into that. So I had went to San Diego State like Jason did, and I got a degree in exercise physiology, and I did that for about, 9 years. I had thought about but just before I was about to graduate, I thought, well, maybe I should just blow this all off and go get a degree at like CalArts. My parents would have killed me. They paid for my first degree. So I didn't do that. So I worked in the industry. I did fitness testing for the Navy for a while. I went to the YMCA in San Mateo here in the Bay Area, and I became the health and fitness director there. But that's not really what I wanted to be doing. And when I went to a friend's graduation at the Academy of Art, he was graduating from the advertising department. I was standing there, and I saw down on the floor that there was a catalog for the school. And so I picked it up off the floor and started rifling through it. And I saw that they were starting the animation degree for the first time that fall. And I was like, all right. So in '95, I decided I'm just going to stop doing what I was doing. I was going back to school. And so it took me about 4 years to get done because I was working full time and going to school. And I will have to tell you, those 4 years that I was at the academy were great, but I didn't get a lot of sleep. So it was harder for that degree than my science degree. But I got done. I got an internship at Wild Brain, and it just went from there. And it's been over 20 years that I've been doing this. But like I tell everybody, there's not been one day that I've said, oh, why did I do this? I have never thought that. I've been tired. I've been like, oh, this has been a long day or a long week, but I have never said that I hated it. So those are the things you just got to think about: is what do you really love to do, and what do you want to do, and work at it. That's all. Hector.
Mic drop.
Hey, no, yeah, the mic was dropped. Boom. All right, everybody. Hey, so we're out of time here, and I know everybody here has a lot of questions, and there's a lot of things that come up. So first thing I'm going to do is this. I want to say in the chat, if you don't mind, we're going to be gone, but we're still here for your questions. So the first thing I would just tell you is in the chat, just if you don't mind, just a big shout out to the whole team tonight. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you guys so much for just spending. I know if you guys don't know this in the chat, these guys are teaching classes, working with students all day long, and then they're still here tonight. So it's, you know, obviously, especially on a holiday week, I really want to thank you guys so much for taking your personal time to be here for the students. So in the chat, folks, here's the best thing you could do. Look, it doesn't matter if you're international or domestic, if you're in high school, out of high school, whatever. I'm going to drop a bunch of links. I already link bombed everybody before, but just to, if you look in the chat, what you're going to see is a big like bomb of links. What you have is you have a link to the application to the university. If you're in high school, I have a link to our pre-college art experience program. What you're going to see with that is if you're in high school, you can actually take courses for free. I'm more than happy to explain it to you, but it's a way to kind of wet your feet and to explore different courses, different skill sets. If you're, lack of a better term, if you're kind of dating the idea of what your career path should be, this is a really good way of exploring different options. We have events coming up. I wanted to drop in those links, not just to the events next week, but just to the calendar, because we're booked up every single Tuesday all throughout the year. So there's a ton of different things on there. Scholarship links, examples of student work on our spring show site. I did drop our spring show game development link. That's going to be the best of the best student work. We throw that up every single year. Really cool link to check out. So last thing I want to do is just throw in my information one more time. I'm just begging everybody here, don't be shy. I've actually heard back from a ton of people throughout the night. And some of you guys, please vouch for me in the chat if you can. I got back to you immediately. But if you're interested in looking at school, the process is going to be this. We have a wonderful team that will sit down with you one-on-one. And what they're going to do is just talk to you, your family, your parents, yourself. It doesn't matter. But we're just going to explore what it is that you're interested in, what career paths are out there for you, try to kind of help you to clear up a little bit of that fuzziness of maybe where you might want to go with your career. So we're more than happy to take the time to do all of that. I would just tell you, all you have to do is just send me an email, and I'll be the first one to get back to you and try to connect you and make sure that we can set that up. So without further ado, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. I really, really appreciate your time. Once again, a big thank you to the team here from the game development department for taking their time tonight. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and end the recording here. I'll hang back just for a few more minutes afterward just to answer any